Okay, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks especially to Terry Pope and Alex Jonassen. Alex Jonassen, for joining us from the Department of Parks and Recreation, State of California. Terry Pope is the District Interpretive Chief in the Inland Empire District, and Alex Jonassen is Museum Curator 1 in the Inland Empire District. And we're going to hear a little bit today about working in state parks, working in historic sites, and some related types of situations. I'm going to turn the floor over to you both first, and you can give some preliminary remarks, and then we can open it up and have a sort of freewheeling chat. But please join me in welcoming Terry and Alex. This is really a really nice opportunity. So thank you so much for making the trip out.
No worries. This is it has become one of the high points of my year. I'll start. You want? Yeah. Okay. Because I'll do overview and then you'll drill down a little bit. So as you heard, I'm Terry Pope. I'm the District Interpretive Chief. One of the first things, and this crowd probably already knows what a park interpreter is. We're educators. We, in fact, we're there's a movement going on. Okay, I come from a long time back, so it used to be that, oh, we can't change it from interpreter. That's a time-honored tradition, and a lot of us went, but no one knows what we do. And so there is a quiet movement that's gaining some ground to change eventually to park educator, because we are the Interpretation and Education Division, just like you have museum educators now, just for clarity. And also because we work with a lot of teachers on field trips and school stuff, that way it kind of gives us a little more legitimacy as educators. So we do everything from museum exhibits, we do junior ranger and campfire programs, school programs, anything that educates the public about our parks. And in some ways we are interpreters, because we take what's important about a park and we translate it into in ways that our audiences can understand the importance of. So like people could go, what's that lake doing out there, as you see on the screen? And we would be the ones to tell them what we do, why that lake is important, why they should respect what's going on. So that's kind of the where interpretation comes from, but we're educators. We in state parks, we have in our district, we also, the Interp and Ed division also encompasses cultural resources. So Alex is our museum curator, but I am also the cultural resources manager for the district, which means if there's a historic building, which our district does not have a lot of historic buildings, but we do have some. That I usually am the one coordinating with other cultural resource managers at a little higher levels to get assessment plans or preservation plans or other plans like that in the works. So that falls to me, and also tribal liaison, because whenever we have any project, if it's a construction project, if the ground is disturbed, we have to reach out to the tribes. And I say have to, but from my perspective, it's what we should be doing willingly. We reach out to the tribes and say, hey, we're gonna build a fence here. Would you like to consult? And then in those kinds of projects, they would go, well, yeah, do you have a plan for a tribal monitor to be there, like an archaeological monitor? Say that word. But who is a tribal member? Is there a plan if there's an inadvertent find? If they're digging and they find human remains, or they find a funerary item, or a basket, or any piece of pottery. What's the plan? So that's part of what I do. the other part of being tribal liaison is when we have projects that are interpretive or educational. We go to the tribes to make sure their voice is the main voice if it involves tribal history, tribal culture. Right now, we have at least 2 projects in the works that are in co-creation with local tribes. One of those is the Lake Paris Indian Museum, where we are doing a lot of collaboration with the tribes to put their voice in the forefront, because that is their museum. It belongs, the building belongs to the state, but we really want it to be emphasizing their voice. The other is up at Idlewild Campground, which is part of Mount San Jacinto State Park. There's a bedrock mortar in the campground. And it still does have this one funky little interpretive panel that says something about Kauai people, ground acorns here, and that's it. So we're working with 3 Kauai tribes to get some really informative signage and interpretive panels in there. So and it may even be fabricated by one of the local tribes who has a large museum, Agua Caliente. So, you know, those are exciting projects. And then I manage a team of interpreters and curators and a multimedia person and a clerical support person too. So that kind of encompasses my job. When I was a frontline interpreter, I did a lot of frontline stuff. A lot of being in a visitor center and going, yes, this is where your campsite is. Or I fired a cannon for, well, longer than 10 years as part of my job, because I used to do a lot of living history. So in fact, I was just talking with someone this morning who the head of our department who at the Sacramento level, and we were talking about all the weird, he put it very nice. He said, my goodness, you've had a diverse background. And I went, yeah, I'm thinking otherwise known as I've done a lot of weird stuff. So, you know, it's I won't say every second is fun because it's a lot of hard work, but you know what? It's really worth it. You reach people, you feel like you're making an impact, you're creating stewardship, you're protecting resources, you're letting people know why they should, you know, why they should be careful, why they should pick up that piece of trash in the park. It could be something as simple as that. And you have some fun moments too, like when I was talking to a dad about the Civil War and, you know, firing the cannon, and this was when, and I'm a huge Marvel fan, but this was when Civil War came out, and the little his 4-year-old son goes, oh, Civil War, I know what that is, Spider-Man. I went, same idea, Civil War. So, but that was funny. So, but I think, do we want to do questions in between, or do you want me to just go ahead and
We could pass to Alex
Okay.
and then we can open it up to.
Okay.
Yeah, does that sound okay?
So, Alex is like my savior on many stuff. She's our museum curator for the district, and she's the first curator we've ever had in the Inland Empire District. And so she spends a lot of time cataloging things that should have been cataloged many years ago. So I'm gonna hand it over to Alex, and she's gonna talk about her stuff.
Thank you. So hi, everybody. I'm Alex. As Terry and everybody said, I'm the museum curator one for California State Parks, Inland Empire District. So within, I guess the museum curator series, there's different kind of levels. We have like museum techs that work under you, museum curators 1, 2, and 3, kind of advancing to the heads of cultural resources. So essentially what I do is manage all any objects. So that can be artwork, artifacts, that can be historic buildings, that can be old pieces of farming equipment, really ranges. But my responsibility is to make sure we document how we obtain these objects, and we keep their provenience information associated with it. Because as you guys probably all know, knowing where something came from and how it came to be is, you know, just as important as making sure we have that artifact well taken care of. I have a few slides on it. Yeah, so in the Inland Empire District, we have 6 state parks that we're responsible for. So here's some cool pictures. The Ahiaki Regional Indian Museum at Lake Paris in the upper left-hand corner, that's my main office. But We also, so in this district, we're responsible for one of the state's regional Indian museums. So these were 5 museums that were made a long time ago, based on interpreting the local tribes of the Mojave Desert area. So as Terry mentioned, we're working extensively right now with local tribes to gain input on what this museum should be for the future. We got a lot of funds to redo our museums. So that's really exciting. We also have Chino Hills State Park, which has a little visitor center. Mount San Jacinto, which also is a smaller visitor center. So when you're working with state parks, it can range from I have a museum here, or I have just a little like welcome in and taxidermy display thing. So it really ranges. You may have heard of California Citrus State Historic Park in downtown Riverside. That's one of our larger collections. We have hundreds of citrus related farming equipment pieces. So I have to become an expert on citrus farming equipment. So my expertise has to kind of range, but it's variety every day, which I really enjoy. Silverwood
Your
Lake.
job is never boring.
No, never boring. And then Providence Mountain, which is over in the Mojave Desert National Preserve. So it's actually like a historic cavern site. So we have a lot of archaeological material, as well as from Native Americans, and then onward really.
Is that a picture of Mitchell Caverns? Is that?
Yeah,
right?
the
Cavern.
cavern.
Yeah.
It's really
It's
fascinating.
within Providence Mountain State Park, or State Recreation.
Yeah, I've
Area.
been there before. It's
Yeah.
it's worth visiting.
So I have a little background on me, and then I'll get into, I guess, my specifics on my job. So I'm from Lancaster, California, which is about 2 hours from here. I went to Antelope Valley Junior College, which I always like to throw out that I went to junior college because I think junior college is a great way to get ahead and before you transfer to a four-year university. So I just want to put that out there. I gained a lot of experience studying anthropology, specifically archaeology. I also studied art history and studio art in there, so definitely in the right crowd with the studio majors. While there, I kind of gained a lot of lab experience with my professor in archaeology. That's how I gained most of my collection experience was volunteering for things like work study with my professors. She needed to reorganize her entire lab, rebox it all, rebag it all, and inventory it. So I was one of the students that volunteered over the summer to do that. And so I would suggest just asking your professors for any opportunity available really, and be willing to kind of do these extra projects, because that's really what helped me gain experience for the museum field and for archaeology in general. Next slide. I then transferred to UC Riverside in winter of 2019 and graduated from there with anthropology and art history bachelor's. And while there, I experimented. I still study archaeology today. Kind of went into the museum field, but these are just some fun pictures of me. Another similar experience of just reaching out to my archaeology professor, asking if he needed any cataloging work done. Happened to say, why don't you come with me over the summer to our cool archaeological site down in Yucatan. So I was able to excavate there in the summer of 2019. Some of you might be experienced or might know of CRM, cultural resource management. So I know a lot of historians work with historic building assessment reports and stuff like that. So similar to that, what I did for about 1.5 years as an archaeologist. So working for a couple of different firms on some military bases, doing surveys for solar plant installations. I later went on and finished my master's at CSU Fullerton recently in anthropology, where I also got some cool ethnographic experience. I got to go to Ecuador and work with the Shore people and do some interviews with them. So I guess my point in all of this is just be very open in what you're willing to experience. And I think history in general is filled with a lot of possibilities of what you can study. Yeah. So yeah, I guess we can continue on. That's my background. So how I came to state parks, really, I started as a volunteer at the Antelope Valley Indian Museum. So as an interpretive volunteer, so welcoming people in, giving little mini tours. I also started working with the collections there later. I became an archaeological field technician in about 2020. So beginning working with the collections, cataloging things at a bunch of different state parks. I also worked at a local museum in my hometown called MOA, the Museum of Art and History, as a collections assistant. And then I worked there for a couple years, cataloging things. And then eventually moved on to becoming a museum curator about 1.5 years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's flown by.
Kinda
Well,
crazy.
for me, but
Yeah, me too. Next slide. So just I have some visuals of just what I do. So Again, taking care of our cultural resources, that includes like cleaning, vacuuming things, very much kind of learning on the job, but there's also a lot of good trainings and resources on the internet. I think a movement with museums recently is to be more of a community with each other and with the public, not sharing how we can care for our historic objects and things like that. So just learning from the community and things like that. I'm recently with the Balboa Art Conservation group. I forget what they're called, like Balboa Art something like that. But it's a collection, a community cohort group of a bunch of different local museums in California. And we have webinars together and talk about our projects and what we want to learn and stuff like that. So that's really cool. Next slide. So more cataloging. A lot of what I do is as Terry said, is cataloging. So as the first curator, I'm going back a lot. I have to manage like donation paperwork. So if you're into searching through old text, well, sort of, you guys would be maybe searching through old text and donation paperwork of what people were trying to do years ago and sorting that out with legal, also figuring out we actually have legal title to an object. I do a lot of that. And also includes photographing every item, measuring it, putting a little catalog number on it. Next slide, thanks. So you may have seen in a museum little numbers on objects, and maybe you thought what the heck are those things for. So each one in state parks kind of goes with a certain park unit. So we have a big numbering system that I keep track of every park unit. Has the first part of the number, the middle part is what number it is that was brought into the museum, and then each object is the catalog number. So a lot of numbering little pieces of things, and also setting up museum displays, which is really exciting. As we've mentioned before, the Yahya Key Regional Indian Museum is going to be getting a big revamp in the future, so we're hoping to get a lot of work done on that.
Not to mention 3-year searches for flutes.
Yeah, that too. What Terry's talking about is we had some flutes that were supposed to be donated a while ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And then we went on this whole whirlwind quest to get the flutes finally, but we have them installed now and it's all very nice. So
Like 2020 as part of an exhibit.
Yeah.
Started with him, and these were tribal flutes, elderwood. Elderberry wood. I knew that was right. And whenever you're dealing with tribes, you're dealing with a community where you have some folks that are very tuned into modern technology and and then you have other folks that are, have struggles every day with basic survival. And so I kind of had to use one of my tribal contacts, and he had to go to the artist once we tracked down which artist had them, because they were carved by one artist and then given to another artist to decorate. And that person did not have a cell phone, so he had to borrow a cell phone. So there was, we had to work that angle, and we finally got them. I went and I took the payment that we had. I took the check to him in a parking lot in Temecula, and he gave me the flutes, and it was all good, and we already had the paperwork all done from previous when the main exhibit was done. But it took us several years of having to chase down. It was one of the first things I started working on when I got in my current position, which was August of 2022. And we got them in February of this year. So sometimes things take time. And there's one of the things I laugh with some of my Indigenous friends about is, okay, this meeting's supposed to start at 9:30 and it'll be like 9:50, and we're like, oh, Indian time. Yeah. And then it's a very real thing, it's like, it's not disrespectful, it is just how tribal folks run, and if you're gonna be very hard and fast about time, you're not gonna have a very good relationship with tribal partners, because they're gonna go, God, you're thank you. Yeah. In fact, I had a conversation with someone who was like, wow, and he was not in the historical community or the interpretation of tribal work. And he was being very colonizer, and he said, well, people who are constantly late are very rude. I went, oh, it's kind of an imposition of Western manners on tribal people, you know, and he's like, ooh. So,
So, yeah, also continuing, with what I do is a lot of data entry, so, with state parks, our system's called TMS, or the museum system, it's not very fancy, but that's our cataloging system, so every object, that gets those catalog numbers goes into a giant digital database. So a lot of data entry is part of what I do. This allows everybody within the state to see each other's collections. So if we also wanted to share things with each other for exhibits in the future, this is very handy. We're also hoping to make this available aspects of it to the public called e-museum in the future, hopefully. So that way schools or other people can have access to, state parks collections and stuff there for the public. Next slide. Oh, yeah. Another not so fun aspect of what I do that I also like to point out is pest management. So museums, especially located in places like state parks, which have protected species around. So like the Regional Antique Museum is located right in a protected kangaroo rat space. So I work with, so naturally that means we shouldn't be, using harmful pesticides and things like that in the area. So we have to work with our Natural Resources Department on things like that. But definitely, mice, certain types of insects are prone to eating our collections. So I do have to do, building inspections. I have to make sure our pest traps are set and work with maintenance a lot to make sure those guys are getting out of there. I went into a railway car that was like filled with a big bat colony above in the railway car and everything. And I was supposed to catalog all the things inside and everything covered, like mono, and I'm like, oh, not gonna work out. Yeah, needed some PPE after that, but so with state parks especially.
Choose not to get on top.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
But with state parks, especially working in a lot of interesting, historic buildings, places. Some of them are accessed every day. Some of them are accessed every few years. That's all very fun. Another big part of what I do is climate control. So, in museum spaces, it's really important that we have a constant temperature and humidity in a space, because if the temperature gets really hot and wet, objects can expand and float. Cold and dry, they can contract and crack. So we have an extensive basketry collection at the Regional Antique Museum as well. So I have to be monitoring our climate with our local climate loggers and things like that. Next slide. I'm also responsible for emergency evacuations of collections and things like that, developing emergency plans. So this was an example of when I was an archaeological aide back in 2013. The city of Tulare, which is where Colonel Allensworth State Park is located at, was threatened by a flood. We had a lot of snow that year up in the mountains, and so it was just slowly melting. And of course, the city of Tulare is built where there used to be a lake. So the whole thing's at a lower elevation, that everything was just going to get filled. So due to the flood, I had to drive out like 3 hours every day and try to evacuate 2 buildings. And with our collections objects, luckily it was a very slow melt. So this was done over a period of several, weeks. But I packed up about a building, and then they called out the evacuation. But that's just kind of an example of what I would do, and what I do.
And you'll find that curators, rightly so, are more on the better safe than sorry. Let's evacuate that or protect that, even if it ends up we don't need it. So
yeah,
we can all take a lesson from curators.
Yeah. So then this is Colonel Allensworth State Park, just to give you a visual. So I was evacuating the closest to the flood zone, so the bakery and the rail car, which the rail car was the one that was filled with bats. But Colonel Allensworth, is a state park that's filled with a bunch of historic buildings that are filled with hundreds of objects in some cases. So it was a really big undertaking that we were going to have to do, calling in support from all over the place. So within state parks, our main supporting system is each other. So we call on other districts and other state parks if we need help to come down and help each other, which was the recent case too that I did with the one that caught on fire. I'm forgetting that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Will Rogers?
Will Rogers, yeah. Well, we lost Will Rogers in the one of the fires, the Palisades fires, yeah. So after that, the Angeles district did a really good job of getting most of the historic priority objects out. But afterwards, we helped salvage things and package them all up to send them to Sacramento. So that was another thing recently that I did. But
And watching a state parks evacuation during a disaster is kind of an amazing thing, because all of our curatorial staff, museum staff, cultural resources staff are in very good contact with each other. And because I remember in Northern California, we had the Vallejo home up in the North Bay that was on fire, or trying to be on fire. There was a fire nearby. And then for Shasta, it has some historic buildings for the fire a couple of years ago. And basically the call goes out, it's like, she texted me and she said, I need to head to Angeles. Let me know what I need, if you need anything. I'm like, go. And folks from all over the place went to those sites. In Palisades Fire, it was the Will Rogers and Topanga Ranch, yeah, and worked on the evacuation, because it was an all hands on deck thing. And we all said, let us know if you need anyone else. We got interns we could send, so it really is a group effort. At Lake Paris, we have a sea crate with a big cache of evacuation materials, like the packaging and wrapping and stuff, so that if a regional entity, historic building, museum needs them, we can bring them out. So.
And I think this was like my final example of just I also any donations from the public. So if anybody's like, I want to donate this old, in this case, it was the Riverside Metropolitan Water District wanted to donate some old historic farming equipment that they've had. That was donated to them by a citrus farmer locally to Riverside. And this is it's one of the second models of tractor, like whole graders that were used. So it was pretty significant. I think at least over 100 years old, according to the original model. But so I went out and got to visit them, and they were expanding their parking lot, so they wanted them gone. And so I got to work with them, and we picked it up on a big crane and put it on the back of a semi truck trailer and drove it down to California Citrus, and we got it in. So we're hoping that the Citrus Museum, that maybe is going to have a proposed revamp as well. That maybe this can be part of putting it in the front displays in the future of the park. So I also get to work with just seeing a lot of cool things from the public and what people have and would like to share and donate to state parks.
And sometimes not so cool.
And also not cool. Yeah. Also,
here, would you like this pile of old railroad lanterns and fruit crates? Well, no, we have enough of all of those. Thank you very much.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. And some other things I also really, another big part of what I do is NAGPRO, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that, but I do get to work with our Tribal Affairs Office on essentially getting inventories of all items, cultural patrimony that we have.
Does everybody know what NAGPRA is? Yeah. It's a Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And it basically says that and it's not just state parks, any museum, it's a federal act. Yes. Thank you. Yes. It's a federal act, and what it says is that if a museum and state, federal, but a lot of private museums, university museums are also following these guidelines, has articles that the tribes want back, that human remains, but also funerary items, sacred items, even just something that maybe is not particularly sacred, but would like it back. This is a process by which we send it back, and they could go in, and our tribal affairs statewide person has said, if a tribe comes in and says we want everything, we will give them everything. That I mean, it has to be like if they're Luiseño and they would get the Luiseño items. We're not going to give them other tribes' items, but we would certainly be in contact with the other tribes to go, so we got these things, would you like them? A lot of times you know, there's a negotiation. Sometimes they do just want the items back. There's a, it's overseen by the Department of Interior, the NAGPRA program federally. So it's kind of flown under the radar right now. I haven't heard of too many big issues with it, but you know, everyone's being very careful. And there's this picture that federal NAGPRA uses of a group of tribal members, and they're all walking in a line. They all have cardboard boxes that contain their ancestors, and they're walking with permission and negotiation. Not permission, that's not the right word. But after negotiation, they are walking these items back to their vehicles to take them back to their tribal land. So it's really, you know, it's just used as kind of a cover shot, but it's a really, for me anyway, moving photo. You've seen that.
Yeah, it's great.
And so part of that is if they want to, you know, look through what we have, we give them the space to do that. We hold space for them to do that, to do any ceremonies. So that we're not standing over there going, you know, you can't time that. It's like it's their things, you know. Yeah. So, and their ancestors. As far as we know, in our district, we don't have any ancestors in our holdings. State Parks has gotten most of the ones as a whole that they have had back to their tribes. So,
yeah. So Terry and I both do that a lot, and we're working on establishing, you know, new relationships with many different affiliated tribes in our area. So as an archaeologist and as a curator, I think that's one of the highlights. Also, my job is trying to do the right thing and form communities, you know, people that are. So yeah, I guess that's my job. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, thank you, Terry. This is really cool because we've had earlier in this series, people from museums, people from national parks, people from archives. We've also had educators at different levels. But those three taken with yours really gives a rich understanding of archival work, museum work, and preservation, interpretation, and all those sort of things. This has really been very, very insightful. I'm going to open it to our gang here, obviously our crew on Zoom, but also here in the classroom for questions. If anything jumped up for anybody here, I'm going to have some sort of vocational questions at some point, but I won't pull rank on those yet. Just in terms of you know, getting on the.
And I will, don't let me forget, I will talk about an upcoming position that we have up at Silver Lake for number one. So
I can pull up websites as we go. Anybody in Zoom land, please either raise hand or just go ahead and unmute. We have a group of 10, so I don't think it'll be bedlam if anybody wants to. Yeah, Daniel, please jump in.
Sorry about that. My computer is acting strange. Hello, everyone. So I want to ask both of you a question. I'm kind of curious. I'm not sure if this is really like an important issue or not, but I've always wondered if you guys have any issues with like theft, whether it's like, you know, within like the company, people within like the organization, people that you guys know that try to like, you know, steal artifacts or any kind of objects, or, you know, people from like external groups.
yeah.
And of course, how do you guys deal with it as well? Like, what are like the, I guess, the repercussions or consequences?
Yeah. Obviously, we don't want that to happen. I don't think, as far as I know, I haven't seen any instances of it in our district, which doesn't mean we haven't seen anything go missing, let's put it that way. And I haven't heard of any past instances. That does not mean it does not happen. What it would do, because state parks are rangers, are law enforcement. So what we would do, now we have had things walk away that were the public carried off. We had a reproduction of what was that? It's Noya, wasn't it? Out in front of the museum.
Oh, it was a little pet trigger.
Yeah, petroglyph rock. That, and it just wasn't there one morning, so it became a law enforcement issue. We, contacted our rangers and they did an investigation. We were never able to determine, it was a replica of a petroglyph. It wasn't, right? Yeah, it was a replica. So it wasn't an actual historic artifact, and it wasn't a tribal artifact, but it was still annoying and disturbing so, yeah, like I said, it becomes a law enforcement issue. If it were being done by someone internally, that would be the same thing. It would be a law enforcement issue, and it would probably be grounds for, firing, for termination. We do take those very seriously, yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. Now I have a follow-up question. I've always wondered, like, if you guys have acquired some sort of, artifacts or objects, and let's say, you take it to the institution, does someone like try to come to the institution and try to claim it, or like, try to take it back, like, hey, like this is rightfully mine, like you guys didn't ask for permission?
It would depend on the artifact, but one of the things, and Alex can get into this more, if it were something from an indigenous group, we don't even take it. We're like, no. Here's some contacts with some of the local tribes that have curatorial facilities of their own. That's who you would turn it over to. If it's something that says, and I've never heard of this happening, this is the property of California State Parks, or it has one of our accession numbers, then we might start asking some, questions about like, hey, so how'd you come across this? And a lot of times when people are, and maybe follow up with law enforcement, but a lot of times, there's a statute of limitations. Oh, this has been in my grandpa's garage for 40 years, and he passed away, and we're cleaning out his garage, and we found this, and it's marked State Parks. Then we would probably just accept it back and probably have them do some deed of gift paperwork, and call it good, because obviously there's a statute of limitations on it. And we would probably thank them for bringing it back.
yeah, in terms of if someone like wanted to donate an object to state parks, so part of what I do is that deed of gift, so I have a lot of legal paperwork. Where basically a person has to sign full custody and rights over to state parks in order to donate the item. And there's a little clause in there, like, I have the right to be giving this object, like in the paperwork. So theoretically they would, and then that would transfer full legal title to us. So that's kind of also important why we need to make sure we have our ducks in a row in terms of our legal paperwork, in case someone does do that in the future, saying, I would like that back. But it definitely depends on, the situation.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Thank you very much for answering the question.
Thanks, Daniel. Margaret, then Aiden, then Corey, and the other thing on theft is that the people are cursed.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
that's the thing, and in national parks, state parks, whatever,
Yeah,
if you take a rock or something you're not supposed to take.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Too
You
bad,
take that one.
you take all
I
that.
took, when I was a frontline interpreter, I took a lot of sticks away from a lot of kids. I always had a sticker in my
Yeah.
pocket, and I was like, I'll give you a sticker if you give me the stick.
It's for your own good.
Yeah.
Margaret, please.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first is how much travel time that you do, just in general, like how many times a week you travel, and how often during the day that is, like a few hours or whatever. And then my second question is Mount San Jacinto, that's the Palm Springs Trail, I mean the tram, right?
Yes, that's half of it. Yeah.
Yes, my daughters had their prom or some sort of dance up there, and I'm curious if because I know that like our local high schools do that a lot. I'm curious if you, on your end, you have to deal with that. If you're like the people they contact, if you're the people who puts it together, like whatever. Yeah.
I'll answer that one first because it's an easy, short answer. State Parks works with a lot of partners. One of those are concessionaires, which are basically partnerships that we do business with. The tram, the Palm Springs aerial tram, and the buildings associated with it up at the top of the tram and the bottom of the tram, the mountain and valley station, are all run by a concessionaire. The Palm Springs Area Tramway, they have a contract with state parks that they provide a certain amount of services, and then they give a certain percentage of their like sales of tram tickets or rentals. So that would have been who did that's a great place to have a prom, by the way. I really commend your it was your daughter's class. So so that would have been all planned through the concession. Now there are parks that don't have concessionaires, and they may still have rental spaces, and then you deal directly with the state park with a special event permit and something like that. But for Mount San Jacinto, for the top of the tramway, that's and the bottom of the tramway, that is actually a concessionaire. So that's that. And your other question was about travel. And we can both speak to that. So, you know, there's times when it really kind of depends on the job, and this year has not been a great year for travel because our state budget has been so kind of compacted because of tax issues and everything. We had a very slim budget this fiscal year, which goes from July 1 to June 30th. So we're in the last, 3 months of it right now. We're hoping the next fiscal year is a little freer, because when we do travel, like if we travel to trainings, you're going to a training next this month sometime, the collections training, but at Tahoe. Oh yeah. Did you sign up for that? Go. For the next one. But we also have, trainings that in a tough budget year like this, a lot of those trainings are done virtually. But like we also have, because we're both district personnel, a lot of times like I was up at Silverwood this morning, and then I came here, and tomorrow I'm at my office at Paris, and then Friday I'm back up at Silverwood, and you go all over the place. Our multimedia coordinator and our K-12 coordinator are all over the place in the district. So they might be at Mount San Jacinto or Chino Hills, just to help the frontline interpreters there. Most of the time, our our frontline interpreters are manning they're doing school programs, but they're also manning a museum or a visitor center that operational needs says they need to be there, or they have to have coverage. So we get really good at, arranging coverage if you do have a thing to go to. But yeah, there's some travel, some statewide. I'm going up to Sacramento for the day on the 30th. So it does happen. It depends on what's needing to be done. But yep, Alex does a lot more travel around the district than me because I am trapped by my email. But yeah, there's some around the district.
Yeah, I would just add, so since we're district-based staff, that means we're responsible for like multiple state parks, but there's some curators that if we have like a huge museum facility, they'll just be like, I'm the curator for this park, and then they don't have to anywhere. But since we're district-wide, we do have to travel around a bit, but I kind of enjoy it. And we do have a state vehicle that has state gas and stuff like that, so you don't have to necessarily use your own vehicle, but I get out at least like once a week, typically.
And we kind of, in our positions, our district-wide positions, we support our frontline interpreters with their day-to-day stuff. So like our K-12 coordinator will go help with a school program if they don't have a volunteer for the day. So we've got those kind of things too. So that takes us out and about in the district as well.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alex. Thanks, Margaret, for the question. Aiden and then Corey.
Hello. Oh, hello.
Aiden.
So my name, again, like Dr. Murray said, my name's Aiden. I'm actually majoring or focusing in Indigenous studies and Chicano studies. And so, I've taken classes with professors, our Indigenous professors here at CSUSB, like Dr. Anthony Madrigal, Dr. James Finella and Dr. Daisy Ocampo and Professor Charlie Eaton. And something that they consistently encouraged me to do was to find work or find ways to help the local indigenous communities by finding, things to do within Indian country. And so what are some great avenues for someone like myself who wants to get involved with the community and also within education as a, aspiring history professor? Like, what are some avenues that I could take or you recommend?
I would recommend working with museums if you can, either as a volunteer or as entry level or a little above entry level position, depending on your background and skills, with a local museum that has indigenous collections, because, because that way they'll be at the museum, if they're doing their job right, will be in contact with the local tribes, and that will build a lot of relationships. You're on a really good path because you're working with a lot of the indigenous professors that are around. And what I think Alex and I have both found is the more the more relationship building you do with that community, the more trust you will build and the more opportunities will open up. I would also say when I have openings, and like I said, I only have one coming up right now that will be at Silverwood Lake. But if someone was familiar with, and we don't primarily interpret indigenous history and culture at Silverwood Lake, but we do some. And if we've got someone who's in the interpreter position who has that background or is part of that community, that's gonna be a plus in your favor. It's not a guarantee. Nothing's ever guaranteed. Don't come and go, but you promised me a job. No, I didn't. But that is something in your favor. Alex, follow up with that?
Yeah, also, like Terry said, I've just, in general, with my life experience too, just asking professors or places if they need help. Most of the time people will say yes, and then just kind of say yes to a lot of weird opportunities. Because most of the time I think everything kind of ate into my general life experience and career experience. But we're always looking for volunteers at Lake Paris, at the Ahiaki Ritual Indian Museum. If you're interested in collections, we can talk about that too. I know there's a lot of local, tribal museums as well. I'm trying to think about this area, but there's the Malky Museum over on Morongo, Agua Caliente. Maybe that's a little bit far for you, but there are a lot of, look up your local tribes and governments and then see if they have a cultural museum and they need, if they're taking volunteers or anything like that. I've done a lot of cold emails just to some general line saying hi, and usually it'll lead to a person that you can, talk to and have a relationship with. So, yeah.
And I think
Well,
Alex and I can both tell you that, because sometimes people are like a little reluctant to send a cold email.
Yeah.
Don't be, because I will look at that and I will go, great, this is someone reaching out and let me see what I can find. And I'll usually go, hey, Alex, do we have, or to, whatever they're interested in. So try to find a place. And like I said, just look for all the opportunities, like Alex said, follow up on them, because a lot of people don't, and that puts you in a good position.
For sure. And I actually do have some experience in collections because I had an opportunity to work at our campus museum here for a semester.
Cool.
So yeah. All right, and thank you so much for your answer.
We're always looking for, volunteers. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aiden. Thanks, Terry, Alex. I want to move toward wrapping up in about 5. I don't want to keep our guests too much longer than the hour mark. But Corey, please jump in.
Hi, yeah, I just want to say thanks, guys, for your seminar today, and it's been really great, and I love the slideshow. It was really enjoyable, made it very easy to understand and to really kind of get more involved in your, in what you guys do in your careers. As far as my question, I was just wondering, when the both of you were speaking about how you do a lot of cataloging for the museum that entails a lot of work that's essentially important to not only history but specific areas that you're focused on that are undiscovered. I was just gonna ask, like, what do you feel personally is the most important and the most enjoyable aspect of being able to catalog in your field?
Yeah,
I have to go back a ways before I go to my catalog.
I've always kind of had a love, I guess, for history or just for objects and the things they can tell you about. And so I think just giving some amount of care to that piece by either just describing it or making sure it has a number and it's in the system, just having it be accessible to people in the future, I think giving a little bit of love to whatever thing, I think brings me a lot of personal gratitude. I also think I really enjoyed establishing relationship with tribes. I think that's just a personal thing. Coming as an archaeologist and a museum curator, these are both very kind of colonial disciplines. So trying to create new relationships with people and heal, past traumas. If I can aid in some way through the work I do, I think that's really important to me and good too. So.
And one of the things that I really love in what we're doing now and in talking to our Patty Garcia, who's our statewide tribal affairs person for state parks, is we were talking about NAGPRA in particular and how, okay, let me back up just a second and say, I've always been an advocate of the good death and of healthy death relationships. Does not mean I plan on dying anytime soon, so don't, they won't even let me retire. I try, give a date and they're like, no. So anyway, Patty brought up one day when we were talking about NAGPRA and talking about remains and sacred and funerary objects, she said, this is death work. And that's why it requires a dignity and it requires empathy and it requires a sensibility to help our tribal communities be able to allow their ancestors a good death, finally. Because, again, colonial field, and there's a lot of us now that are trying to make up for a lot of past generational trauma. And we do take that seriously. So yeah, that would be my relationship with cataloging right now. There were a lot of photographs I cataloged when I was a grad student many years ago in the state parks photographic archives up in Sacramento. And you look at pictures of people, historic people, and it's like you don't want to get into weird storytelling like, oh, I bet her name is Jessie and she likes popcorn. But there's one photograph and it was a mother and her toddler on Angel Island. And I worked on a few years later, I went to Angel Island and worked there and lived there for 10 years. And they were dressed in very, very, their best clothes, Japanese clothes. And you could tell that there were two pictures. And the first one was mom setting the little toddler down and then stepping, and the next one is just the toddler. And he looks like he's doing the face screw up that he's going to start screaming because mom's not holding him. And it just tore my heart in just kind of a very sweet and gentle way. But it was like, yeah, been there. Put the kid down for a picture and they start crying and you're like, well, so that will always remain etched in my memory of those two photos.
Wow. Well, thank you both for those answers. It's wonderful to hear.
Thank you, Corey. Thanks everybody for the great questions. We are going to move toward wrapping up. This has been really insightful. I want to know for anybody either watching this later or in this group here, in a previous session,
Yes.
Terry walked through the process of applying, and we did this thing which we sometimes do in this series, which we sort of reverse engineer the perfect job applicant. I remember last year or the year before, Terry Polk has joined us twice before. So I will link to those other videos so that you can go through that and also see the websites that you go to find those jobs.
Yeah.
And also that you said there's a recent posting, and I will send out.
That hasn't come out yet. I still need to write it or I need to update it this week.
This
But
is-
it probably will not, with backups and everything, it probably will not fly until June or maybe even July. But there's now recruiters out of the State Parks Recruiting Office. I'm just gonna finish up with this. And they used to be very generalized. They might be working on ranger recruitment one day and then an interpreter and then a maintenance person. But now they've kind of pared it down to this recruiter works with interpretive work, interpretive applications and cultural resource applications. So they get to know the specifics. And if you reach out to me and Jeremy has my information, if you reach out to me, I'm happy to put you in touch with those recruiters that are particular to our fields. And they will walk you through taking the exam. They will walk you through the application, a mock interview, and they really do good work. So, yeah.
And that's great, and I'll follow up with you about links and things like that to share with everybody. And I'll share that recording of the earlier session, which we marched through some of this test and some of these related things.
All right.
Thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. This has been really great. Really brought together a lot of what we did in these other sessions.
Hey, I have one quick question. I was outside coughing my brains out, so I didn't want to disrupt the class. Don't worry, I'm not contagious. I have voice box.
That's okay.
paresis.
I just went through COVID about a month and a half ago, so.
Well, this isn't that. I have voice box paresis and I suck dust in and I start coughing. Anyway, do you guys ever have volunteers?
Oh, yeah.
Or
We love
docents of
volunteers.
some type?
Yeah.
Is there an application process for that as well?
There is, if you reach out to me and, we do it by park. And Lake Paris is recruiting right now, Chino Hills is recruiting. We're not doing a lot of recruiting up at Silverwood because I don't have an interpreter, a volunteer coordinator, that's part of their job up there, but we will eventually, but yeah, so we do have volunteer opportunities. They can be with collections, they can be doing interpretation, working in the visitor centers, so yeah. And even maintenance, but we tend to focus on the volunteers that are and campus.
Well, I was thinking of helping oddly in evacuation. I was a firefighter for 32 years.
Oh, yeah.
I was in the Coast Guard Reserve 24, Army and Air Force for another 6. I thought somehow I could fit into that mode.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna say this with a full heart. If that's strictly what you want to volunteer for, we hope that we never have to see you.
Oh,
Because that will mean we're doing
well, that wouldn't be the soul, but I was
Yeah.
just,
But
I don't want to keep it too long, but I was curious.
yeah.
I'm gonna shut this down, and then for our 6004 folks, we'll reopen it just a minute.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Also like your,